Hello everyone, this is going to be my second video about the topic of boredom, the experience of boredom, the feeling of boredom, what it means, what it signifies, and so forth. After recording the previous video, which was I called it, What is Boredom? I remembered an article by O.G. Rose, and I went back to read that article to remember what he had written about it and to compare what I said with the content of that article. So this video is in part inspired by that article by O.G. Rose, to which I'll provide a link below in the description. So to put it very briefly, what O.G. Rose points out about the experience of boredom is that it is associated with, being bored is associated with not necessarily inactivity, but not seeing a point in what we are doing. I'm bored, we are bored, we feel bored, not when we are not doing anything necessarily. We might be doing something, we might be very active, very busy, and still feel bored. The reason behind boredom, as O.G. Rose points out, is that even though we might be doing something, we fail to see the point, the meaning, significance in what we are doing. What we are doing doesn't have or ceases to have meaning or significance to us. And this reminded me, as I said on Twitter, it reminded me of what C.S. Lewis says about book lovers and how he compares book lovers and people who don't like reading books. He says that the emotional reaction between those two groups, people who love to read and people who don't love to read, that emotional reaction or those two emotional reactions, they are not two different reactions to the same object. They don't perceive the same object and then feel differently about the same object. Instead, one of those two groups appreciates what the object is, and the other group doesn't see the object. A book lover detects the presence of something, detects the presence of an object that evokes feeling of joy or pleasure. So if we think about boredom along those lines, then we move a little away from looking at it as an emotion primarily, as a feeling, as an emotional reaction, emotional response that comes after perception. Instead, we think about it as a way of perceiving or failing to perceive, or as a sense. When I lose my vision or when I lose my hearing, I lose my ability to detect certain presences or detect presences via a sense. So without vision, without my sight, I would be unable to detect the presence of objects that are visible. Without my ability to hear, I would be unable to detect presence of objects and events via hearing, via sound. Boredom signifies in a similar way having lost a sense that corresponds to a certain kind of presence, a certain kind of object. In that sense, boredom, being bored, is a failure of sense or a failure of sensing a kind of presence. Then the question becomes, what kind of presence is this that the bored person has failed to detect? And here I have a suggestion that we can consider. We can consider this possibility, this way of thinking, that boredom is a meta emotion or a sense about emotion, just like it's not unique in that way. An emotion like empathy or a response like empathy, an empathetic response, is one of the things that makes it special is that it is about emotion. The target of empathy is another emotion. Boredom might be similar in this sense. When I feel bored, when you feel bored, what we are failing to detect is a way of feeling about the situation. And another clue that confirms this is that boredom is quite difficult to articulate. It is easy to say that I'm bored, but it is difficult to talk about why we are bored. So that's a clue. One important consequence of thinking about boredom in this way is that it informs us about individual differences. As some psychologists have informed us, we are not all the same with respect to boredom. Some people are more inclined towards boredom. They are more inclined to experience and report boredom, being bored. And some other people are less likely. And why are we different? Because presumably we are different in the degree to which we rely on our emotions to detect significance, or a subset of emotions. It's possible that some people rely on a subset of emotions to judge the significance, the meaning of an activity. And other people rely on other things, maybe an intellectual judgment or a different subset of feeling. So individual differences in boredom, in our proneness to boredom, might be because the emotions that we fail to detect, those emotions, people are different in the extent to which they rely on the presence of those emotions. So that's one way, just one way to think about boredom. It might be useful. So if you have any thoughts on that, I would love to hear them. Otherwise, thank you for watching.